Joining us now to talk about the ongoing war in Ukraine is Tom O'Connor, senior writer of foreign policy at Newsweek. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I read one analysis that said this will look more like World War II, out in the open, traditional fighting, which gives Russia an advantage and maybe puts Ukraine's best fighters at risk. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, even President Zelensky has warned that the biggest battles of the conflict might just be, we might not have seen them yet, they might be upcoming, and this will be just that, perhaps more conventional lines of conflict that would diminish Ukraine's ability to stage partisan or ambush operations against Russia, especially because the Russian forces will be operating quite close to their border in a region that has been under separatist control since 2014. So there does seem to be a slight advantage to Russia's part here, and at the same time, of course, Russia will continue to, I'm sure, conduct missile strikes or cruise missile strikes, airstrikes in other parts of the country in Ukraine as well.
You wonder what is the end game here? Has the end game changed for Vladimir Putin at all? We know there's this May deadline. They have a victory day. Some people say he wants this to be over by then. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the end game hasn't been clear because it's not been a very transparent communication of exactly what Russia is looking for here. We know that they talk about demilitarization, denazification, recognition of Crimea and the Donbass republics, but we don't really know what that looks like in practice because, of course, you can understand the recognition. That is it's a finite thing. But when it comes to demilitarization, denazification, these are largely rhetorical goals. So I think that it could be interpreted whether Russia will be able to declare that sort of victory. It's a matter of whether they can actually do that or not, and what that actually looks like. So I think that what we'll see is a concentration of fighting in the east, and then ensuring that Ukraine declares itself as a neutral, non-nuclear state. There seems to be some movement towards that. The Zelensky administration seems to be open to that sort of thing. And then perhaps a more protracted frozen conflict in southern and eastern Ukraine. Now, whether they're able to win a ceasefire, I think is important because that will determine whether it's a frozen conflict or whether they'll be fighting for some time to come.
So should President Biden be changing his tactics at all? Are these sanctions working?
Well, the sanctions don't seem to be having a very strong effect, at least on President Putin's calculus. I think it is increasing pressure upon Russia economically. But again, I think that this is something that President Putin probably factored in going into this conflict, perhaps not the magnitude of these economic restrictions, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be particularly swaying him as much as perhaps events on the ground itself are. So I think that the U.S. will continue to maintain pressure against Russia, not just economically, but through significant military assistance to Ukraine, because what that'll do is allow Ukraine to stand for a longer conflict, to be able to replenish its ammunition, perhaps certain military equipment, as Russia tries to drain Ukrainian resources. So I think that's what the U.S. will do. At the same time, I think that there's going to have to be a recognition from the U.S. side that perhaps a diplomatic solution is the way out of this sooner shorter than later, and that will involve encouraging Ukraine perhaps to make some difficult decisions that President Zelensky himself has said that he expects to have to make, hopefully in his mind, with a meeting directly with President Putin.
Tom O'Connor with Newsweek. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Here's a look at some of the other top stories of the morning.